Well, howdy do everyone, and welcome back to the ranch. As promised, here we are with our first episode of, what would you call it? Restoring an abandoned Blazer, or that danged old Blazer. I'm not sure what we're going to name this series, but nevertheless, here we are. Like I said a few videos back, I decided to go ahead and, instead of just incorporating little bits of this rebuild in my regular videos, I'm going to make individual videos that are dedicated only to the restoration of this, maybe one or two a month, and just put them in with my regular channel. But they will be labeled so you'll know what they are. So if you are not a person who's interested in automotive restoration, you can just skip the whole video. I think that's an easier thing to do for you people, especially, as opposed to just putting little bits of it into each of our regular videos. So anyway, that's the plan for right now. If it gets really bothersome, I'll make a completely separate YouTube channel dedicated just to this Blazer rebuild. But anyway, that's where we are. For those of you that are new to the channel or new to this whole concept, to give you a little back story on this, about 23 years ago, 1999, 2000-ish, I was driving home from work one day and I saw a Blazer, and I've always liked these old Blazers, the first generation Blazer, but I saw one parked in my neighbor's driveway out beside her house. And I thought, man, that's cool. And I thought back, it just kind of made me think back to when I was in high school. I remember the first one I saw is 1969. This rich kid, his daddy bought him one, and he came to school driving it. Of course, I was driving an old beat up piece of trash, but as most of us were. But anyway, this was such a cool truck that he brought to school. It was a dark green Blazer, and it had a V8, it had air conditioner, it had four-wheel drive, and the whole roof came off of it. And for a 16-year-old kid like me, I think I was a sophomore, I just thought, my goodness, how cool can you get an off-road vehicle that turns into a convertible? But I always wanted one. A few years after that, my roommate, when I was working for the government, my roommate had one, and we drove it all over Texas and just had a blast in that truck. So I've always had a soft spot in my heart. I've always wanted one and never owned one until this little dude right here. So anyway, you know, like I said, they've always been so cool, and I've always wanted one. And here was one just right outside my neighbor's house, and I didn't think much about it that day, but after passing it for several days in a row, you know, weeks in a row, months in a row, my neighbor, they were clients of mine at the vet clinic. They were in there one day, and I asked them what they were going to do with the Blazer. And the lady said, well, it's my grandson's, and he's been deployed to Iraq. And I said, oh, and I said, well, does he have any interest in selling it, since it's just sitting out there with no roof on it, just out in the weather? And she said, I'll find out. So she called me a few days later, and she said, no, I talked to him, and he does not care to sell the car. He wants to keep it. I go, okay. And I said, would you like for me to come up there and I'll cover it up so the rain doesn't ruin it? And she said, I'll get my son to do that. And I just thought, you know, at this time, you know, Matt was fairly young, and I thought, man, what a perfect what a perfect father-son restoration. And really didn't need a whole lot of restoration back then, but what a good father-son project that would be for Matt's first car. And but sadly, that conversation I had with her repeated itself yearly for the next 23 years, up until the time that, again, sadly, she passed away. And once she passed away, the whole estate came up for sale, and they called me and asked me if I wanted to buy this Blazer. And because the grandson now lived on the eastern seaboard, didn't care to come dig this thing out of the hole it had sunk itself down into, and then have it trailered all the way to the East Coast states. So I said sure, so I wound up buying it. And the first time I showed it on this channel, a lot of you said, you are crazy, Lee. And yes, I know, I already knew that. But nevertheless, the little dude is mine now. After passing it and wanting it on my way to work and on my way carrying kids all over the place for the last 23 years, For better or for worse, this is my Blazer. And on my first impressions of this Blazer, it looked pretty good. From about 50 feet away, or about 100 feet above it, it looked pretty nice, especially on the right side. But moving around to the left side of the vehicle, you could see the tires had lost air and the wheels had dug themselves deep into the earth. And not only that, but a tree had grown up in front of the vehicle, blocking access to the hood latch. So they told me it had a motor and transmission in it, but I did not know for sure. Buyer beware, right? And since there was no roof on the Blazer at all, the interior was pretty much shot after 23 years of rain, wind, and sun. But my biggest concern was rust. But anyway, the day that I bought it, I called Matt and asked him if he could bring his big truck and the trailer with the big winch on it to see if we could pull this old Blazer out of its 23-year-old bed. And fortunately, we did get the tires to hold air long enough to get it winched up to the trailer. And about the time we got it to the trailer, the driver's side front wheel just gave up the ghost, and we wound up just totally destroying that tire getting it on the trailer. Well, Matt and I finally got it loaded up on the trailer, and we got it to my house. And you can see here how we got it off the trailer. The dang thing would not roll at all, so we just strapped it to a tree and then drove the trailer out from and under it. Not advisable, but it worked. And if it works, is it really a dumb idea? Questions to ponder. But airing up the tires and spraying a little soapy water on them, it was pretty easy to see where the leak was. It was right on the edge of the rim. The moisture from the earth had basically just eroded the inside of the wheel. So as a last-ditch effort, I got my grinder and just ground that whole rough area down until it was pretty smooth enough to where hopefully when we aired up the tire, it would meet good and flat with the edge of the wheel, and it did. And they are still holding. We are sitting on them right now. They're still holding air. So got lucky there. And once we got it rolling, I started working on the cleanup of the old girl just to see exactly what we had. And what we had was 20 plus years of pure neglect. One of the scariest things is right there where you're sitting in the floorboard. Oh, and I forgot about this. This was all sitting in the passenger floorboard. Was 2 gallons of antifreeze, about 4 quarts of oil, 2 or 3 quarts of transmission fluid, and a can of brake fluid. That kind of told me right there that we may have some problems with this vehicle. But like I've already said, the interior was completely rotten. Previous owner had put on this fine steering wheel here. Looks like it's from a 80s Monte Carlo or Caprice or something. Definitely not your regular truck steering wheel from years back. It at one time, well, it's still kind of spongy, but feels pretty darn crappy to me. I digress. The door panels, which you can't see here, but you can see in this picture, were completely bleached out by the sun, dry and crusty. And the dash pad, it's not cracked, but it's just kind of hard and feels burned, for lack of a better word. But anyway, it will work just fine. And the bed in this thing, I think there were enough parts back there to build a complete small block Chevrolet engine, but it would have been a crappy one. But the main thing was the frame was good and solid. From the tip of the nose to the tip of the tail, the frame is in really, really good shape. And of course there was the expected rust that you normally find on these cars, even if they're not setting out for 23 years in a row, especially on the inner fender wells, the lower fenders and the fender extensions, the lower doors, the windshield frame. There's areas up in here. And also the cowl. The cowl is what bothered me most. And fortunately, the floor of this little dude was rhino lined before they set it out there. So the floor is, with a few exceptions, is in really, really good condition. This vehicle kind of canted toward the driver's side. So down here, there's some rust, but I don't even know if I'm going to mess with it or not. We'll wait and see what happens. I do have to cut some panels out of here, so at that time we will evaluate it further and see what we need to do. And like I said, the cowl, which is the panel right in front of the windshield here, is the area that I feared worse, because that tree had grown up over the hood and it had been dropping leaves for 23 years down into this cowl panel. They get in there and then they just sit there and they just get compacted and compacted and they rot, they turn into dust. And every time it rains, they hold water and they rust out the channels in the bottom of the cowl. That's what I feared, and we do indeed have a problem there. We will address that in just a minute. But after we got it home, I was able to open the hood, and lo and behold, there was a motor in there, transmission, and a transfer case. So looking good. Had both differentials, so we've got a vehicle here. But I needed to see if it would turn over because it's been sitting for 23 years. So I pulled the spark plugs out and I filled up the cylinders with Marvel Mystery Oil, let it set in there and soak for 2 or 3 days. Then I came back, put a wrench on the crankshaft with a breaker bar and worked it back and forth and back and forth, and then got it to where I could spin it, and spun it very, very easily. So I thought, well, that's great. So I thought, let's put a battery in it and see if the starter will turn it over too. So I put a battery in it, and I was kind of scared because the wiring is really, really sketch. And so we hooked it up. Okay, my curiosity got the best of me here, so I went ahead and hooked up a hot battery. So far, nothing is smoking. Don't see anything bad going on yet. Let's just see if she'll turn over or even make a noise. Nope, no noise at all. Let's see if we may have headlights. No, we've got some work to do, folks. And honestly, after seeing all the wiring under the hood and the fact that all the wires that go to the starter were loose and floppy, they were hooked where they were supposed to be, they just weren't tightened down. And then looking at some of the other wiring junctions throughout the engine bay, coupled with this rat's nest under the dash, it was absolutely no surprise that you can't find 12 volts anywhere in this truck other than on top of the battery. And once again, by far the biggest problem we had with this truck were all the holes in the lower cowl panel here, where those wet leaves year after year after year had rusted through the bottom of the panel, to where every time it rained, water came through here and ran right down on top of the fuse block. And you can tell by looking at these pictures of the fuse block right here, the fuse box for the purist. Many of the contact points are totally rusted and broken away. And another electrical issue, looks like old Bubba decided he would update this car with a new alternator that had an internal voltage regulator. And in doing so, he put that in there, but he left the old voltage regulator and did not take it out of the electrical system. And 2 voltage regulators hooked up together, not too cool. So at this point in the game, I had paid $1,500 for this truck. It did not have a title. That wound up costing me $450 by the time that was all said and done. And I had to make a decision. Did I want to just cut my losses right now and just junk this thing? Or did I want to throw some serious money at it and see if I could make it run? My 23-year-old dream, see if I could make it run. So I did the right thing, and I threw a whole bunch of money at it to see if I could make it run. My wife probably has a different opinion on whether that was the right thing to do. I may or may not have asked her permission. I don't recall. Well, folks, that should get you up to speed, up to the point where we pulled this thing into the shop, and I started dismantling it at that point in time. The biggest problem that I had, I really wanted to see if I could get the motor running, and I bought a wiring harness for it, and I'll show you all this in future videos, but I knew I had to go out there and cut that cowl out of the way and weld a new one in, because it's a mess. And I didn't want to do that with the new wiring harness in place, because I knew I'd wind up burning it up and have to buy another one. So that's kind of where we are right now. I'll give you a little preview of it. This is what it looks like now, just from where I'm currently sitting. So you can see it's pretty gutted. And here's what the engine bay looks like. So you can see I've been a busy beaver, but like I said, we'll probably put 1 or 2 videos up here each month. So I hope you like this so far. I know this was kind of a boring video to get going, but I just kind of needed to get everybody up to speed, get everybody on the same page. I know a lot of my regular subscribers have already seen the majority of this, so I apologize for that. But starting with the next video, I'll show you a whole bunch of stuff you've not seen yet on this little car here. But anyway, guys, thanks for being here today. Thank you so much. I hope this is interesting, and I hope you like this kind of stuff as much as I do. I know we got a bunch of car guys and car gals on this channel, so hopefully you'll all enjoy this too. Once again, thanks for being here. God bless you all. I look forward to seeing you next time, and I always want you to remember I love you. Bye-bye now. So what you doing there, Al?
Neutering a dog, Dad.
All right. Who's going to learn you?
That's a mistake.